Materia Medica is a Latin medical term for the body of collected knowledge about the therapeutic properties of any substance used for healing. The term derives from the title of a work by the ancient Greek physician Pedanius Dioscorides in the 1st century AD, De Materia Medica, on medical material. The term Materia Medica was used from the period of the Roman Empire until the 20th century, but has now been generally replaced in medical education contexts by the term pharmacology. History. Ancient. The earliest known writing about medicine was a 110-page Egyptian papyrus. It was supposedly written by the god Thoth in about 16 BC. The Ebers Papyrus is an ancient recipe book dated to approximately 1552 BC. It contains a mixture of magic and medicine with invocations to banish disease and a catalogue of useful plants, minerals, magic amulets and spells. The most famous Egyptian physician was Imhotep, who lived in Memphis around 2500 BC. Imhotep's Materia Medica consisted of procedures for treating head and torso injuries, tending of wounds, and prevention and curing of infections, as well as advanced principles of hygiene. In India, the Ayurveda is traditional medicine that emphasizes plant-based treatments, hygiene, and balance in the body's state of being. Indian Materia Medica included knowledge of plants, where they grow in all season, methods for storage and shelf life of harvested materials. It also included directions for making juice from vegetables, dried powders from herb, cold infusions and extracts. The earliest Chinese manual of Materia Medica, the Shenong Bensao Jing, was compiled in the 1st century AD during the Han Dynasty, attributed to the mythical Shenong. It lists some 365 medicines, of which 252 are herbs. Earlier literature included lists of prescriptions for specific ailments, exemplified by the recipes for 52 ailments found in the Muamdui tomb, which was sealed in 168 BC. Succeeding generations augmented the Shenong Bensao Jing, as in the Yaroxing Lun, a 7th century Tang dynasty treatise on herbal medicine. In Greece, Hippocrates was a philosopher later known as the father of medicine. He founded a school of medicine that focused on treating the causes of disease rather than its symptoms. Disease was dictated by natural laws and therefore could be treated through close observation of symptoms. His treatises, aphorisms and prognostics, discuss 265 drugs, the importance of diet and external treatments for diseases. Theophrastus was a disciple of Aristotle and a philosopher of natural history, considered by historians as the father of botany. He wrote a treatise entitled Historia Plantarium about 300 BC. It was the first attempt to organize and classify plants, plant lore, and botanical morphology in Greece. It provided physicians with a rough taxonomy of plants and details of medicinal herbs and herbal concoctions. Galen was a philosopher, physician, pharmacist, and prolific medical writer. He compiled an extensive record of the medical knowledge of his day and added his own observations. He wrote on the structure of organs, but not the uses, the pulse and its association with respiration, the arteries and the movement of blood, and the uses of theriacs. In treatises such as On Theriacta Piso, On Theriacta Pamphilius, and On Antidotes, Galen identified theriac as a 64-ingredient compound, able to cure any ill known. His work was rediscovered in the 15th century and became the authority on medicine and healing for the next 2 centuries. His medicine was based on the regulation of the 4 humours and the properties. The Greek physician Pedanius Dioscorides, of Anaxabus in Asia Minor, wrote a 5-volume treatise concerning medical matters, entitled Pi Epsilon Rho Lambda Eta Sigma Alpha Tau Rho Iota Kappa Sigma in Greek, De Materia Medica in Latin. This famous commentary covered about 600 plants along with therapeutically useful animal and mineral products. It documented the effects of drugs made from these substances on patients. The Materia Medica was the first extensive pharmacopoeia, including about 1,000 natural product drugs, 4,740 medicinal usages for drugs, and 360 medical properties. The book was heavily translated, and portrayed some of the emblematic actions of physicians and herbalists. One such page is physician preparing an elixir. Dioscorides' plant descriptions use an elementary classification, though he cannot be said to have used botanical taxonomy. Book 1 describes the uses for aromatic oils, salves and ointments, trees and shrubs, and fleshy fruits, even if not aromatic. Book 2 included uses for animals, parts of animals, animal products, cereals, leguminous, malvaceous, cruciferous, and other garden herbs. Book 3 detailed the properties of roots, juices, herbs and seeds used for food or medicine. Book 4 continued to describe the uses for roots and herbs, specifically narcotic and poisonous medicinal plants. Book 5 dealt with the medicinal uses for wine and metallic ores. It is a precursor to all modern pharmacopoeias, and is considered one of the most influential herbal books in history. It remained in use until about 1600 AD. Medieval. The experimental scientific method was introduced into the field of materia medica in the 13th century by the Andalusian Arab botanist Abu al-Abbas al-Nabati, the teacher of Ibn al-Bayta. Al-Nabati introduced empirical techniques in the testing, description and identification of numerous materia medica, and he separated unverified reports from those supported by actual tests and observations. This allowed the study of materia medica to evolve into the science of pharmacology. Avicenna was a Persian philosopher, physician, and Islamic scholar. He read about 40 books on medicine. His two most famous books are the Canon of Medicine and the Book of Healing, used in medieval universities as medical textbooks. He did much to popularize the connection between Greek and Arabic medicine, translating works by Hippocrates, Aristotle and Galen into Arabic. Avicenna stressed the importance of diet, exercise, and hygiene. He also was the first to describe parasitic infection, to use urine for diagnostic purposes, and discouraged physicians from the practice of surgery because it was too base and manual. In medieval Europe, medicinal herbs and plants were cultivated in monastery and nunnery gardens beginning about the 8th century. Charlemagne gave orders for the collection of medicinal plants to be grown systematically in his royal garden. This royal garden was an important precedent for botanical gardens and physic gardens that were established in the 16th century. It was also the beginning of the study of botany as a separate discipline. In about the 12th century, medicine and pharmacy began to be taught in universities. Shabbath ibn Abraham, better known as Shabbath I Donolo, was a 10th century Italian Jew and the author of an early Hebrew text, Antidotarium. It consisted of detailed drug descriptions, medicinal remedies, practical methods for preparing medicine from roots. It was a veritable glossary of herbs and drugs used during the medieval period. Donolo was widely traveled and collected information from Arabic, Greek and Roman sources. In the Dark and Middle Ages, Nestorian Christians were banished for their heretical views that they carried to Asia Minor. The Greek text was translated into Syriac when pagan Greek scholars fled east after Constantine's conquest of Byzantium. Stephanos made an Arabic translation of De Materia Medica from the Greek in 854. In 948 the Byzantine Emperor Romanus II, son and co-regent of Constantine Porphyrogenitos, sent a beautifully illustrated Greek manuscript of De Materia Medica to the Spanish Caliph, Abd-ar-Rahman III. In 1250, Syriac's scholar Hebraeus prepared an illustrated Syriac version, which was translated into Arabic. Modern age. Matthias Silvaticus, Avicenna, Galen, Dioscorides, Platerius and Serapio inspired the appearance of three main works printed in Mainz. In 1484 the Herbarius, the following year the Garde der Gesundheit, and in 1491 the Ortus Sanistatis. The works contain 242 and 570 references to Dioscorides, respectively. The first appearance of Dioscorides as a printed book was a Latin translation printed at Cole, Italy by Johann M. Alamein under M. Demblich in 1478. The Greek version appeared in 1499 by Manutius at Venice. The most useful books of botany, pharmacy and medicine used by students and scholars were supplemented commentaries on Dioscorides, including the works of Fuchs, Anguillara, Mattioli, Maranta, Cisalpino, Dodones, Fabius Columna, Gaspard and Johann Bauhin, and of Villanueva, Civitas. In several of these versions, the annotations and comments exceed the Dioscoridian text and have much new botany. Printers were not merely printing the authentic Materia Medica, but hiring experts on the medical and botanical field for criticism, commentaries that would raise the stature of the printers and the work. Most of these authors copied each other from previous works. It was normal to add previous commentaries and marginalia to make the text look more enriched or thorough. There were several De Materia Medica works noted as anonymous A, B, C and D by the expert on Dioscorides De Materia Medica Professor John M. Riddle. The anonymous A has to do with authors on translations of handwriting. Riddle proved anonymous C to be Bruyerinus Champia. During the 16th century, the most representative among them were Emma La Barbaro, Jean Roule, Bruyerinus, Michel de Villanova, Pietro Andrea Mattioli, Andres Laguna, Marcello Virgilio, Martin Mathy and Valerius Cordis. 16th century. Emma La Barbaro. The work of the Italian physician and humanist Emma La Barbaro was published in 1516, 23 years after his death. Poliziano wrote to Emma La Barbaro, forwarding a manuscript of the first-century pharmacologist Pedanius Dioscorides, asking him to send it back annotated by that very learned hand of yours, thus lending the volume additional value and authority. Barbaro was professor of the University of Padua in 1477 and translated many texts from Greek to Latin. He sought to avoid mistakes by gathering as many manuscripts as he could for checking the texts. He claimed to have corrected 5,000 mistakes between two editions of Pliny the Elder's Naturalis Historia, a work he found very similar to Materia Medica, for which he used at least two editions as well. The result of Barbaro's effort occupied no fewer than 58 pages, printed in 3 columns of about 50 entries each. The work provides a key to over 9,000 items. All references were to pages. This was the first annotated Latin translation of Dioscorides' Materia Medica, and Sir Barbaro became the earliest of the Renaissance translators of Dioscorides, a practice that saw its golden age in the 16th century. Barbaro's work was later corrected by Giovanni Battista. Jean Roule. Jean Roule was the dean of the Faculty of Medicine and physician to King Francis I of France. He perfected the Latin translation of the Materia Medica directly from the Princeps edition. He tried to develop a translation joining philology, botany and medicine. This work, printed in 1516 by Henry Estienne Stefano, became very popular, having 20 editions during the 16th century. He published editions until 1537, printed by Simon de Collines. For this point, Latin was the preferred language for presenting De Materia Medica, and Roule's editions became the basis from which many other important authors would start to create their own Materia Medica. Roule was also teacher of two great De Materia Medica authors, Michel de Villeneuve and Andres Laguna. Bruyerinus Champier was the nephew of Symphorien Champier, and physician of Henry II of France. He was an Arabist, and translated works of Avicenna. In 1550 he published his first Materia Medica, printed by Balthazar Arnoult in Lyons. This work had a second edition in 1552 printed by Arnoult in Lyon and Vienne. Both works were illustrated with figures by Fuchs, but in this last edition there were also 30 woodcuts by the botanist and physician Jacob d'Alechamps. It seems that the reason that he used his initials H.B.P. and not his full name in the work, it could be that he practically transcribed commentaries of Mattioli. Michel de Villeneuve, Civitas. According to Spanish scholar González Echeverría in several communications in the ISHM, the John M. Riddle anonymous B would be Michael Civitas, and that the anonymous D is two commentarians, Civitas and Mattioli, being the last one hired for editing the Lyons printer's tribute to Michel de Villeneuve edition. Michael Civitas, using the name Michel de Villeneuve, who already had his first death sentence from the University of Paris, anonymously published a Dioscorides de Materia Medica in 1543, printed by Jean and Amp. François Frelin in Lyon. It has 277 marginalia and 20 commentaries on a De Materia Medica of Jean Roule. According to González Echeverría, to be associated to an anonymous pharmacopoeia that Michel de Villeneuve published the same year, meant to be a single unit, which is typical when it comes to De Materia Medica pharmacopoeia. This work had 6 later editions, in 1546 and 1547 by Jean Frelin, who considered Michael de Villeneuve his friend and brother, another in 1547 by Thibaut Payen, etc. There is another Materia Medica with commentaries on a Roule edition of 1537, printed by Simon de Collines. This work contains hundreds of manuscript marginalia, all along 420 out of 480 pages. The scholar González Echeverría demonstrated in the ISHM with a graphological, historical and linguistic study that this task was carried out by Michel de Villeneuve. It also demonstrated that this document was written by the same hand that read the famous manuscript of Paris, a work also by Michel de Villeneuve consisting of a draft for his Christianisme restitution. The manuscript of the Complutense is not just a union of the ideas of the previous works by Michel de Villeneuve, Seraphim Ratio, etc., but also of the later works, Inquiry and De Materia Medica of 1543, sharing with this last many of its 20 big commentaries. For instance, according to this theory, in 1554, after the immolation of Michael de Villeneuve, Civitas, the editors and printers that had worked with him would have decided to make a new De Materia Medica as a tribute to their colleague and friend. All the commentaries that could identify Michel de Villeneuve as the author disappeared, but the rest are copied from his work of 1543. It is a very strange edition because there exist 4 different kinds of copies with different covers, one per editor: Jean Frelin, Guillaume Rouillet, Antoine Vicent and Balthazar Arnoulet, who was also the printer of this unique edition, in Lyons, for developing of bigger work and to blur the mark of Michel de Villeneuve. They hired the expert on De Materia Medica, Pietro Andrea Mattioli. Pietro Andrea Mattioli was a renowned botanist and physician. He published a translation of De Materia Medica into Italian in 1544 and 10 years later published a work in Latin with all the plants of Dioscorides and 562 woodcut illustrations. It appeared in 1554, printed by Vincenzo Valgrisi, in Venice. Mattioli made a massive contribution to the original text of Pedanius Dioscorides. In some sections Mattioli added information that exceeded 15 times the length of the original text. It resulted in a very big extension of the work, in beauty and information. It was later translated into German, French and Bohemian. Mattioli held a post in the imperial court as physician to Ferdinand II, Archduke of Austria, and the Emperor Maximilian II, Holy Roman Emperor. This position granted him an immense influence. He frequently tested the effects of poisonous plants on prisoners in order to popularize his works. He also affirmed that Jean Roulle had declared some information in the Lecopsis chapter of his Materia Medica. This is false, but still Mattioli used it as a reason for attacking Roulle. He did not tolerate either rivals nor corrections. The naturalists and physicians daring to disagree with him, or who had corrected him, were attacked. The list of important characters that were admonished, rebuked, or pursued by the Inquisition contains Wieland, Anguillara, Gesner, Lusitanus and others. This made editions of Mattioli's De Materia Medica omnipresent throughout the continent, especially in northern Europe. Andres Laguna. In 1554 the physician Andres Laguna published his annotations on Dioscorides of Anisabus printed by Guillaume Rouillet in Lyons. Laguna was the first to translate a Materia Medica into Castilian. His translation was made from one of the Latin editions of Jean Roulle. It was also based on classes Laguna took from Roulle as his pupil in Paris. Laguna points out some of his teacher's erroneous translations, and adds many commentaries, which make up more than half of the total work. Laguna explored many Mediterranean areas and obtained results concerning many new herbs. He also added these prescriptions and commentaries to the recipes and teachings of Pedanius Dioscorides. He also includes some animal and mineral products, but only those related to simple medicines, that is, animal and mineral products that are medicine or are parts of a medical compound. This was not an illustrated work. In 1555 he re-edited this work with woodcuts. It was reprinted 22 times by the end of the 18th century. Laguna wrote very well, with explanations and practical commentaries. He refers to anecdotes, adds commentaries on the plants, provides the synonyms in different languages, and explains the uses in the 16th century. These qualities and the number of woodcuts made this work very popular and appreciated in medicine far beyond the 16th century. He had problems with Mattioli for using some of his commentaries without mentioning him. Laguna had problems with the Inquisition, just like Michel de Villeneuve, for both were Jewish converso, a fact that could have made them limit their commentaries to avoid risks. Nevertheless, he was the physician of Charles V and the Pope Julius III, and that helped to establish his work as the last word in Materia Medica, and as the basis of Spanish botany. Valerius Cordis. The physician Valerius Cordis, son of the famous botanist Valerius Cordis, went through many woods and mountains discovering hundreds of new herbs. He gave lectures on Dioscorides at the University of Wittenberg, which experts from the university attended. Cordis had no intention of publishing his work. 5 years after his death, a Materia Medica with commentaries was published. It contained the index of the Botanologicon, the outstanding work of his father Valerius, who developed a scientific classification of the plants. The following pages are on Gesner's nomenclature, relating the different synonyms used for referring to the same plants of the Dioscorides work. The abstracts of the lectures of Valerius Cordis go from page 449 to 553 as commentaries. This section consisted of a very refined explanation of Dioscorides' teachings with more specifics on the variety of plants and habitats, and corrections of errors. Cordis refers to both his and his father's observations. Eucharius Roslin's herbal illustrations are prominent in this work, followed by 200 of Fuchs. This work in the model of botanical description, and many consider it the boldest innovation that was made by any botanist of the 16th century. Martin Mathy, the French physician Martin Mathy, published in 1553 the French translation of De Materia Medica, printed by Balthazar Arnault in Lyons. This granted much more access for the students of medicine to the teachings. The Greek version was reprinted in 1518, 1523 and 1529, and reprinted in 1518, 1523 and 1529. Between 1555 and 1752 there were at least 12 Spanish editions, and as many in Italian from 1542. French editions appeared from 1553, and German editions from 1546. Bibliography. Morillon, R.E.Qgis Rasht, Rochdi, Encyclopedia of the History of Arabic Science, 3 Rutledge, ISBN 0-415-12410-7.